The 2021 Subaru Forester. A spacious interior with everything you need for confidence on the road ahead. Standard symmetrical all-wheel drive plus 33 miles per gallon. Standard EyeSight driver assist technology. It's the SUV for all you love.
Lease a 2021 Forester for $214 per month or take.
Hello, and welcome to the Quiet Adventures Symposium. This presentation is called the Five Rivers Canoe Voyage. We hope you enjoy the trip as much as we did. Your paddlers are Gary and Linda DeCock from Grand Rapids, Michigan. The Five Rivers Voyage started on July 29 and ended 51 days later on September 17, 2017. We started here in Michigan's Upper Peninsula at the headwaters of the Wisconsin River. We followed the Wisconsin for 430 miles south to the confluence with the Mississippi River. We then traveled 420 miles on the Mississippi to the confluence with the Illinois. Heading upstream on the Illinois, we then crossed to the Des Plaines River, eventually to the Ship and Sanitary Canal, the south branch of the Chicago River, and then finally the main branch of the Chicago to end near Navy Pier. Here we are at the headwaters, getting ready to start our trip to Chicago. This was our first portage, small dam between Lock View Desert and the headwaters of the Wisconsin River. We're paddling a 17-foot Old Town Canadian, a design by Ralph Fries, who for decades sold canoes at the Chicagoland Canoe Base. Seemed like an ideal canoe to be taking to Chicago. We had heard that the river was most easily paddled if there was at least 6 inches of water on the gauge at the headwaters dam. As you can see, there are 12 inches of water when we started our trip, so we considered ourselves very fortunate.
So we are on the river. We have finished the first of many portages on the Wisconsin River. I think it turned out to be a total of 26 portages for us. And we've crossed our first state line. And as you can see, the headwaters of the Wisconsin River are just beautiful. Lots of twists and turns and water lilies. And the trouble is, you don't have to go very far. I think this was a few hundred feet before we came to the road. And there we had a choice. We either unpack all of our gear again, haul it up over the road, get back into water that was fairly deep, or one of us who happened to have a bug net in her pocket would walk the canoe through the culvert. And since the other of us didn't like spiders, you know who that person was. So one issue that you always have when you are paddling in an expedition is where you can camp. And we were a little worried about that on the Upper Wisconsin, but we found to our great pleasure that there were beautiful campsites on the Upper Wisconsin. We didn't actually camp here. This is Bacadabon Creek. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a beautiful campsite up on the bluff, and we actually stopped there for lunch. So this is day 3, mile 47, and this is one of those days when we weren't sure we were going to be able to find a campsite. And when you're looking for a campsite and you don't know what's there, usually you pass up 3 or 4 beautiful ones, and then you think, oh, maybe we'd better start looking for a campsite, and then you see nothing for 10 miles. We were just starting to feel that way, and all of a sudden we looked off to the left, and here was one of these beautiful campsites, blanketed in pine needles, and you couldn't ask for more.
Here's our next portage, one of the large dams on the Upper Wisconsin. Every one is different. This one did have some small gravel spread out over the larger stones, but it's still difficult to take out, especially if there would be any wind. Here's another portage. This one had some nice wood steps, a little steep, but it's a little easier to get up on the steps. I was the official photographer, so I got to do all the photography work while Linda did all the hauling and carrying.
Somehow that always seems to be how it goes. Well, this is my kind of portage. Apparently, the paper mills and maybe the power companies along the way have to assist with portage if you're not able to portage on your own without going over private property. So we pulled up to this portage, and there's a big sign that you can't miss saying portage information. And you walk up, and there is a red telephone, and you pick up the receiver, and somebody comes on the line saying, "Can we help you?" And so I explained what we were doing, and the man on the other side said, "It'll be about 15 minutes before I get there. Is that okay?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, that is just fine." So this man pulled up, and Gary, of course, always has a plethora of straps along, so we were able to strap the canoe to the boat, and he took us through I think this was a paper mill, took us through their yard that we could not have gone through otherwise, and brought us back to the river.
Speaking of the river, there's one rapids on the Wisconsin, Whirlpool Rapids. We had heard about it, and we had some information on how to locate it. They said there's an island on your river right. That's where the Portage Trail starts. Well, of course, there's lots of islands, and they all look the same, so we just moved carefully down the rapids. It's more of a boulder garden up ahead, but we did see the island. We did find the takeout. Felt quite pleased about getting out. And then a youth group came along of about 7 or 8 canoes, and they all ran the rapids. They all took a different line. They all had different techniques, and they all made it through. So I'm not sure what the lesson is there, but I guess young people can be really lucky, I guess, sometimes. This is the island where we camped. We ended up the next morning, there was a little rain. It was very misty. It was hard to read the river because of poor visibility, so we ended up, we were forced to stay here a second night, and that was okay with both of us. It's just a beautiful spot. It's probably been camped on for thousands of years, and we were the only ones there, so I highly recommend this spot for spending some time next to the Whirlpool Rapids.
Yeah, on that previous campsite, you could almost feel the ghosts of all the people that had been there before, so we were pretty lucky to have an extra 24 hours there. So this was another very interesting portage. So we pulled up to the cement slab and started unloading our gear and started ferrying it up, got to the top of that levee and walked across the strip of grass, and what would you see? A golf course is what we saw. So we weren't sure. There weren't any signs down there really pointing to a portage, but I thought, well, we'll walk down and talk to some of the people. Talk to these women, and they said, "Oh, sure, just walk along the golf course." And that's one of our rules. If you need permission to do something, ask somebody who doesn't have the authorization to give it, because they always say yes. So this lady asked us what we were doing. And I said, "Well, we're paddling the Wisconsin, and then we're going down to the Mississippi and up the Illinois." And she just looked at me and she said, "Hoofda." That's when we knew we were in Wisconsin. So another interesting portage. There were times when we thought the people who created these portages were doing their best, but they hadn't really portaged a canoe before. This was, it's steeper than it looks. You take it one step at a time, because under these rocks, which go anywhere from maybe 3 inches in diameter to 7 inches in diameter, there are a bunch of smaller stones, which means that everything slides. We made it through, no broken ankles or broken hips.
Sign says canoe takeout. We're actually putting in. Um, it's easy to get confused. You can see the fence here. We were following the trail and we couldn't really tell where we needed to be. And then somebody on the other side of the fence yelled out, "You want me to open the gate for you?" And we said, "Yeah." So the trail actually goes through a locked gate and then continues on for a short time.
And the locked gate says no trespassing on it.
So you gotta be flexible. Here we are camping under a railroad bridge. It's always a tough decision picking a site. It looks nice and quiet now. Depends on how many trains roll through in the middle of the night. But after a long day of paddling, it's easy to fall back to sleep after a train rolls through. And then it's always a great spot for breakfast. Here we are in the morning, a little misty, getting going. You know, there's a good chance that Linda's the only person in the history of the world that's had breakfast in this spot. It's just highly unlikely that anybody visiting or fishing would have stopped here for breakfast and had a cup of coffee. So those are the kind of rare experiences that you get to have when you're doing a long trip on our rivers. We talked about all the dams. So obviously with all the dams, you get lots of reservoirs, and some of them are large. We tend to take the shortest distance across, assuming that the wind and waves conditions allow. Try to keep it moving. Most people that paddle the Wisconsin stay on the river sections to avoid the large reservoirs, windy conditions, and more boat traffic. But when you're doing the river, you do it all. This is another one of those 26 dams. The critical piece of information when you're approaching a dam is which side do you take out on. There's some great guidebooks for the Wisconsin's river that will tell you which side to take out on. Many times there's a sign there that marks the start of the Portage Trail. So as long as you approach with caution and you've done a little research, you'll know which side you need to be on.
So this is one of the prettiest spots that we have. I say that with every picture, but this is one of the prettiest spots. This is just before the Castle Rock Dam. We were planning on paddling to the dam and portaging it, but instead we happened to see this island jutting up out of the water, a very rocky island, and we thought, oh boy, I wonder if we could climb up on that. Well, we pulled up. Gary found a place not only to climb up, but to stow the boat. You can see the boat. I don't know if Gary can point out where it was. No, not on that picture. But we were also able to climb up to the top of the island. And once we got up there, we decided that it's worth carrying all of our gear up there and camping. The top of the island had obviously been used by people before. There's a trail that went from one end of the island to the other, but you had a 360-degree view from this spot where we camped all the way around the island. Okay, another one of our least favorite portages, not because there was anything wrong with the portage, but as we were coming down with all of our gear, all of a sudden I heard a snap. And I thought, oh, this cannot be a good thing. We'd already had a tire go flat, and you can see Gary had some white tape on it just to say, yeah, this was the tire that went flat. But this was definitely a worse situation. The hub on the portage wheels actually had broken. And so this was like the second time that we had to do a repair on this. So when you have something like this and you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, what do? You call a river angel. Some of you may recognize this guy, John Van Berger, a Wisconsin native who is also an intrepid paddler and just a wonderful human being. We've gotten to know John before a few times at different shows, and he had said, when you come through Wisconsin, you've got to call us, and so we did. Called him up that night, and he said, well, where are you? I can meet you And he listed a whole long line of places where he could meet us. I said Merrill would be good. So that's what he did. We got to the next portage, and there he was waiting for us. So he drove us all over, took us out to lunch, and then we ended up at
the sawmill. We were getting ready to put in, and it started to rain. Actually, it was a light sprinkle. Actually, it was just kind of a mist, a very thin mist. But we said, hey, we can't paddle in these conditions. We might as well kill some time. So an excellent spot to kill time in Merrill, Wisconsin, is the sawmill. So here we are. What can you do? Killing time. And this gives me a opportunity to talk about consumables. Everybody knows your main consumable is food. We carried probably 2 weeks of food. That would get us until we had a resupply stop or could get into town. Second consumable is water. We carried probably 8 gallons, enough for probably 3 days before we would resupply. Another consumable is fuel. Carried 2.5 quarts. That could probably get us through 2 weeks of cooking. And our last consumable is power. Here you can see we've got all our batteries, everything that needs to be recharged, plugged into this outlet. We're always on the lookout for an outlet, a place to stop for an hour or two and try to get some more power. I want to talk a little bit about the dells. We were a little apprehensive about paddling through the dells. We had heard a story from John Sullivan about a near swamping of his canoe in the dells due to the boat traffic. And so we tried to be very careful. We ended up camping at the end of the lake just north of the dells, got up early the next morning, ran this section, and then we took the west channel, which was a longer channel, but it avoided the narrows. I've never been through the narrows, but it seemed like it might be a place where there'd be more traffic and less area to maneuver. So we stayed in the west channel, continued on down through the dells area. Then there's a dam here that you have to portage, so that takes some time. Then you start to run out the final section, and as long as you can get here before the boat traffic starts, you're in good shape.
So here's where we camped on our night before we ran the dells. When we pulled up to this campsite, we thought, oh, this is beautiful, although it was full of power boats having great parties. And we thought, well, might be kind of noisy, but maybe they will give us beer. Well, they didn't come and give us beer, but they left at around 6 o'clock, and we had this gorgeous spot all to ourselves. So this was at about mile 280, so we're more than halfway finished with the Wisconsin, and we expected the next day to be beautiful. So woke up before dawn, got all packed up, and got on to, it looks like a lake, but it's going to take us down to the dells. This is a lake that John Sullivan called Omen Lake because he had such an unpleasant experience going through the dells. However, we were there early enough that there were no motorboats out. We saw no motorboats all the way through the upper dells. As you can see, we were prepared. We were wearing vests, visibility vests over our life jackets just in case, but it wasn't a problem. It couldn't have been more peaceful. I think we were glad that we took the longer route just because we were able to slow down and enjoy it.
After you get through the dells, you're starting to get into the lower Wisconsin. And we were looking for the Aldo Leopold Shack. It's part of the Leopold Foundation. It's not marked. I didn't have a real clear idea, but I had done my homework. We grabbed this beach and we walked up through the trees, and we were in the right spot. Aldo Leopold was the creator of the conservation ethic, which is kind of the basis of all sustainable land use. Many of you probably have read or have a copy of a Sand County Almanac where he lays out his love of the outdoors. This is the shack at the Leopold Foundation. One of the things that Aldo Leopold said was, there are some of you who can live without wild things, but then there are some of you who can't. This used to be a chicken coop. He turned it into his summer home.
So we are on the lower Wisconsin now, and here I go again. This was just one of the most beautiful parts of the river, and I know that I've said this before, but the sandbars were amazing. Camping was beautiful. Gary took this photograph at about twilight, and you can't tell where the water ends and the sand begins. So everybody has to do laundry, right? Unless you're Gary. Gary's not so fussy about that. But this is one of our beautiful sandbar spots, and I decided I wanted to do laundry. So we haul out the washing machine, which is the blue bucket, and Gary puts up the clothesline, which is held up by paddles. And so you swish all of your stuff for a while and hang it up to dry, and you're good to go for the next day. And as I said before, there are lots of sandbars, which is great for camping. It does mean that when you're paddling, you have to keep an eye on how shallow the water is getting beneath you, or you could end up on one of the sandbars and you have to get out and pull yourself away from it again. Here we are at about mile 430 of the trip, which is the confluence of the Mississippi. 3 years prior to this trip, Gary and I had paddled the Mississippi River from up in Montana down to the Gulf of Mexico, and I think we both fell in love with the Mississippi. So when we started planning this trip, I was looking for something where we could paddle for a while on our beloved Mississippi again. So here we are. The Mississippi is behind us, and we're saying goodbye to the Wisconsin River.
River changes when you get to the Mississippi, lots of boat traffic, lots of locks and dams. Our strategy for approaching a lock or dam, again, is to know which side to take out on, which side the lock and dam is on. Call them on our VHF radio, announce that we are a white canoe downbound, and if they come back with the good news that we'll fill the lock and have it ready for you, you're good to go. If there's other traffic, you may have to wait a little while, but you lock through just like any other boat. Another thing you'll find on the Mississippi is there's a little more day traffic, weekend traffic, people on pleasure boats, and there are occasionally places like this where you can stop for non-critical supplies, which for us are things like cold pop. The one thing you can't carry on a river trip are cold drinks, and so it's a real pleasure to find something that you can pull up next to, tie the boat off, and walk in and get a cold root beer. Big bridges, lots of construction, things moving around on the water that you have to watch out for. You just have to remember you're the smallest thing on the water, and it's good to keep your eyes open and to pay attention to what's going on around you.
So one of the fun things about being back on the Mississippi again was that we came by some of the places where we had stopped before. In fact, there was one night where we were camping, and I kept thinking, this is so familiar, and all of a sudden I realized that we had camped here 3 years before. This is an unusual place. It's Iowa's only island city, Sabula, Iowa, and we had stopped there before. They have the best convenience store in the world for finding lots of stuff to eat, and so we stopped here again and got a grocery bag full of food and took it back to the dock. And this is the dock. It's very friendly. If you want to pull your boat in here, you're down current, you can tie it up. It's very quiet. So we left our boat, and right up above the boat is a park, and that's where we had our lunch. This happened to be the day of the solar eclipse in 2017. And so we were there for the solar eclipse and got to watch it through the camera.
On the Mississippi, lots more shipping going on. Some of the older facilities that are moving grain down the river. This is a lock and dam, lock and dam number 14. There's actually an alternative lock here, and unfortunately it was closed. When we came down here previously, we had missed the turnoff and had to back paddle a while to get to the alternative dam. This year, we knew it was coming. We made the turn into the channel and got there, and it was closed. So we had to carry this lock and dam. There's an island here, which is the Smith Island Recreation Area. It's near Davenport, Iowa. Yes, it says no trespassing, but we're on the actual gates of the lock that cross us over from the island to the shore.
And believe it or not, this is where we camped. So I'd mentioned before that we always like to ask for permission to do things, but not necessarily from people who can give it to us. So we finished up here, and we were a little later than we anticipated because of the lock being closed and having to portage it. And we were heading right through the Quad Cities, and we were pretty worried about finding a camping spot in the cities. So I asked 2 people fishing, 1 contract worker, and they all said that sure, it'd be fine if we camped here. Just in case, I went up to the high security office that you see up there in the right of the screen and found this nice lady and explained our situation. And she says, oh, absolutely, nobody's going to bother you there. And in fact, there's a portage on that you can use and have a good night. So we figured we were good to go. And we thought we were. We made it through the night, and the next morning we were packing up, and actually the park security officer came by and asked us to move along. But that was fine. We'd made it through the night.
Lots of public docks along the Mississippi. There's no charge, especially during the week. There's not many boats tied up, so these are really nice ways to get access to the river frontage along some of these small towns. Here's one, Hannibal, Missouri. Stopped here and had breakfast.
Okay, so rule number 2 is when there's food available or when you see a restaurant, always stop. This was 10 o'clock in the morning, so this was breakfast number 2. We happened to be in Louisiana, Missouri, and knew that there was this restaurant here, and so we stopped. As you can see, it was breakfast number 2 for me. It was breakfast number 2 and 3 for Gary. So one of the things that's beautiful along the Mississippi are these beds of American lotus, and I swear the flowers are as big as your head. You feel like you're in a really mystic spot when you paddle up to these beds of lotus, but a tip, don't try to paddle through them. They're way too thick. You won't get anywhere. This is a marina in Grafton, Illinois. We stopped here when we did our Mississippi trip and found out that it was a great place to get a shower and do some laundry and visit the restaurant on the 2nd floor. So we decided to do that again here because this is where we were going to start paddling up the Illinois. We did not know what the Illinois was going to hold for us. We knew that we would be paddling upstream, and we thought we could do it. Turned out we could, although it was a good thing it was day 35 rather than day 2 or 3 of our voyage.
Only a mile or 2 up the Illinois, you'll come to the Pierre Marquette State Park, which turned out to be a beautiful spot. We walked up to the lodge and asked if they had any cabins that we could stay in, and they said, well, we're all sold out except for tonight. So it was perfect. We got a cabin for one night.
And why was that important?
because it was September 1, our anniversary.
And which anniversary was that?
I forget.
It was our 45th wedding anniversary.
Illinois, lots of lift bridges. There's less traffic, but it moves more slowly through the locks and dams, so that can sometimes hold you up. Again, there's still opportunities for public docks. Easy to get inside, even if there's power boats tied up on the outside. You can tie up inside and walk into the community and do some shopping. Here we are at the Peoria lock. When we called in, they said there's going to be a 4-hour wait. So that means we leap into action, unload the boat, put it on the portage wheels, and roll through as fast as we can. At one of these, we actually passed a towboat that was pulling barges, got ahead of it, and then it had to pass us. So that was quite an achievement.
So this is camping on the Illinois River. The Illinois River is not really a paddling destination, and we did not find a lot of campgrounds or designated sites, or even sites that we thought were very easy to get into. This was a great site because the sand came right down to the water, and we saw this and we thought, oh yeah, this is home for the night. It was a perfect place to camp. This site, on the other hand, what you can't see is that the entire bank is covered with vegetation, 90% of which is poison ivy. It took us a while to figure it out, but we soon found that there were sometimes little paths leading through the poison ivy, and that if you could make it through to the path, you'd get to the top of the hill, which had been scoured by the last flooding. And so we ended up camping on a couple of spots like this, which were perfect. So I said that Gary doesn't do his laundry. Not true. Here's Gary doing his laundry.
This is just a picture to talk about life outside, living on the river. There are slow changes that occur while you're living outside, and they can go unnoticed until you take your sandals off. And then you can realize that you've been wearing these sandals now for over a month, and they have left a mark. And that mark will soon fade, but you will find that many of the experiences that you have on a long river trip do not fade and can stick with you for the rest of your life. Some more public docks. You can see there's very few boats tied up. There's nothing moving. This gives you a chance to tie up and walk into town, look for some food, look for some water. We did not drink river water. We had a water filtration system, but we didn't use that. It was more convenient just to stop and fill up at a public tap in a small riverside community. This looks real busy, but the rule of thumb on the river is to look what's moving. What's coming at you, what's going the other way, what route are they trying to take. Obviously, you're trying to move through without getting anybody's way. So sometimes it's best just to take your time and watch things to see if they're tied up and then proceed.
So another nice camping story. We knew that there was a marina here that had a couple of cabins, and we thought, well, I'll bet if we stopped here, they would allow us to camp. And so we stopped, we went into the restaurant, talked with Marthy, one of our new best friends, and she said, well, no, I'm one of the new owners, and those cabins have been shut down for a year. She said, but you know, you can just camp in our yard here. And there was nobody else there, and so we did. Had a wonderful campsite, went back to the restaurant. They plied us with food. We came back with full bellies, and as we were leaving, Martha said, so if a guy comes and starts yelling at you early in the morning, don't pay him any attention. He's the other owner. Just tell him you're my sister. Needless to say, we got out of there before dawn the next day. So this was another campsite. We didn't know if we were legal or not. It was fairly late when we got here, set up the tent and thought we were doing pretty well. In the early morning, we're having our breakfast, and all of a sudden, one of these little trestle cars comes over and a guy leans out, and I'm thinking, oh, he is going to so yell at us, but he just waved and said good morning. So another one of our rules is that you have to get closer. Quite often, misty or not, you're heading towards something and you see boats moving around and you hear loud noises and it sounds like there's construction and you really don't know what you're headed toward, but you stop and you look at it for a while and then you have to get closer. Okay, third rule. If you want to get a favor from somebody, do it when they're having happy hour. That always works. So here we're 2 paddle days from Chicago, and there's a yacht club here, and we were hoping that they would allow us to camp, and we stopped at the bar, and the guy at the bar said, sorry, honey, you're in the big city now. People aren't so nice to you. They want your money. So we thought, well, we'll try it. So I'm walking, and Gary's paddling the canoe through this yacht club, and I see people up on the deck having happy hour. Turns out this is the owner and her husband. And so I explained our situation, and she was a little uncomfortable because she doesn't want this place to become a destination for river rats. But her husband said, oh, we ought to be able to work something out. So they pulled away a few urns and garden gnomes from under the deck where nobody could see us and said, sure, put up your tent there. Inside behind the blue door, you'll find showers and washing machines. Help yourself.
Here we are, real close to Chicago. We're coming up the Des Plains. We're trying to get to Ile-à-la-Cache, an island takeout, but the river's getting shallow. It's later in the year. We're having trouble dragging along the shore on these slippery rocks, and we decide we're going to take out here. We've got a phone number for our daughter. We give her a call. She'll come and get us. So we decided to skip a short part of the river here. What we were looking for was the Chicago Portage. This is a sculpture of Pierre Marquette, Louis Joliet, and then a Native American guide that is at the park at the historic Chicago Portage, which is where you would cross from one watershed on the Mississippi side to the other watershed, the Lake Michigan side. This is a little bit about what we were attempting to do. We were going to come up the Des Plaines River. We'd actually ended up taking out here at this park. We were then going to come back the next day and take this little private road and put in here under the expressway bridge. This would be the sanitary and ship canal, which would take us up to the south branch of the Chicago River. It was a good plan, but we had some unexpected difficulties.
Who knew that the road to get back to where we wanted to put in was a no trespassing road? Well, actually, we did because we checked it out and we saw the sign. But as we were coming through this time with the boat to get over there, we saw a police car. And so we're driving along and Gary's saying, keep going, keep going. And I'm saying, stop the car, which we did. So I got to know Officer Cook very well. Turned out he tried really hard to get permission for us to put in at the site where we wanted to put in. He said, that's a really terrible put in. Well, we'd seen it before when we hadn't gotten caught when we were scoping it out, and it was way better than a lot of the put-ins that we had. But he couldn't get permission. It was a Sunday morning, even though he made a lot of calls, there was nobody available. So finally, when we'd kind of given in, I said, could you do us one last favor? And he said, what is that? And I said, can you get out so that we can get a picture with you? So here we are with Officer Cook, boat on the car, and we're ready to get back to put in at a different, I guess, a legal spot. By the time we finished our voyage, which was like just a couple of hours later, Officer Cook had followed our Facebook page and had liked the postings.
Here's what our plan was for getting into Chicago. Officer Cook had sent us to a Richard Daley Park on the Sanitary and Ship Canal. That's going to take us into the south branch of the Chicago River, up through the loop where the south and north branches join to create the main channel. We are then going to take that out to the lock system next to Navy Pier. So we have a video to show that. This is our takeout. Navy Pier is behind us. We hope you enjoy the video. Thank you for watching. Thanks to Ralph Rees for building us a beautiful canoe. We raised $13,000 for the water charity, Water for People. Let's start the video.
Hi, it's Saturday morning. It's launch day. We're having a few butterflies, but anxious to get on the water.
First day of the 5 River Voyage for Water for People. We are headed for the headwaters of the Wisconsin River. Got 60 days to get to Chicago and WEFTEC. See you there.
Have you ever driven over a highway bridge and couldn't help but look below? Or stood on a shoreline's rocky ridge just to watch the water flow? And count yourself as one of the few with a different set of dreams, the kind that keeps you up at night, 'cause you can't wait to get to that stream. It's more than a river. More than the water flowing or where it's going. It's the grip on the paddle and the shift in the saddle, the V in the boulders and the lean in the shoulders. When you reach for the eddy, it doesn't get better than this. Yes, it's more, so much more than a river. All it takes is a little class 2 to still give you a rush, and you live for a breath of the valley air in the mist and the morning hush, when it doesn't matter just where you are as long as the water's white. Some say it's a crazy way to live, but to you it's a way of life. It's more than a river. More than the water flowing or where it's going. It's the grip on the paddle and the shift in the saddle, the V in the boulders and the lean in the shoulders. When you reach for the eddy, it doesn't get better than this. Yes, it's more, so much more than a river. It's the grip on the paddle and the shift in the saddle, the V in the boulders and the lean in the shoulders. When you reach for the eddy, it doesn't get better than this. Yes, it's more, so much more. Oh yes, it's more. Oh, so much more. More than a river